G'day you mob, how's it going? I am Pete, your host from Aussie English, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing polyglot, speaker, and YouTuber Lina Vásquez. Now, Lina speaks something like 8 different languages. She has an incredibly interesting story, being born in Latvia, raised in Australia, having lived over in Europe in multiple countries. She has been raised speaking multiple languages from birth, but then learnt a bunch more languages later in life, and I think she's still learning them. I think Portuguese is the most recent one that she's been tackling. And I just decided, you know what, I need to get this chick on the podcast, most importantly because she was raised in Australia, so you may notice that Aussie accent. Anyway, this was a relatively long chat about her life in Australia, overseas, identity, learning languages, psychology, habit building, everything like that. It went for about an hour and a half, so I have turned this into a 2-part series. Here is part number 1. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have polyglot Lina Vasquez here. Lina, how are you going?
I'm well. Good morning to you from sunny England. How are you?
I'm good. So, man, there's a lot of questions, but how did you end up? We were just talking about your surname. You were saying that it was originally Strode, now it's Vasquez. So, from what I've gathered in your video, you have a very interesting origin story that is a lot more interesting than, say, someone like me. Can you tell me a bit about it and how you ended up being a Latvian living in Australia, going to England with a Spanish surname?
There's more to that story as well. There are little milestones in between.
Oh man, but, have at it.
The stage is yours, Lina. No, well, you're actually one of the very few people who know that I had a different surname as a child. Obviously, if you went to school with me, you would know. But my stepfather is Peruvian, so my Latvian surname is Strode, and of course in English you just pronounce it Strode. And yeah, so when I was 10, I had my surname changed because my mom got married and everybody had Vasquez. So she was like, "Do you want to have Vasquez?" So I was like, "Yes."
Or she was like, "You can be the odd one out if you want, but."
No, I think I personally just wanted it because I didn't want to be associated with my father. So
gotcha.
Very deep, very quickly.
Yeah. We can pass by that quickly. Go for it.
It's all good. I'm an open book. I'm an open book for you. So that happened, and I guess the first 7 years of my life was spent traveling between Latvia and Australia. So I started school in both countries, and my grandmother lived in Australia and my mom had moved there when she was 18, kind of on a bit of a whim. So that's a cool story as well. Basically, after the USSR broke down, and Latvians started looking for their family members, my mom found an uncle of hers who had ended up relocating to Australia. He just invited them and said, "Do you want to come and live here?" basically. So my grandma and my mom went. They didn't speak a word of English. My mom probably knew how to say hello, how are you? Ended up becoming an English teacher. And yeah, so then they moved. My grandma stayed. My mom went back, had me, and then we moved. And and so then years later, my passion for languages took me to studying, languages and law. And then I did a part of my law degree in Germany. And I fell in love with Germany, so I stayed there, and now I'm in the UK because I just wanted to move again.
Yeah, well, what made you move to the UK? If you would imagine that most polyglots, especially, you're a native speaker of English, effectively, whether or not you were born in Australia or an English-speaking country, you're a native speaker of the language. Most polyglots would be in a rush to move to a foreign language country, right? What brought you back to England?
So I was living in Berlin at the time, and I had this intuitive feeling where I was just kind of thinking about, okay, I want to study again. And for me, just the best options of what I wanted to do were either in the UK or Australia. And at the time, I didn't feel like I was ready to move back home. And so I wanted to still stay in the European continent. But just because of, I guess, friendships and other connections and business opportunities as well, just for me, the UK felt like the next best place. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to do this for a year. If I like it, I'll stay. If I don't, I don't. So I'm moving again next week, which probably gives you an answer.
Boom.
But it's been a fantastic year. But I think, you know, I kind of just whatever feels right, I go there, I move there, I spend time in a place. And at the end of the day, you always have options, you know.
So was this just a little bit that you were, you know, pissed about Brexit and Great Britain leaving the European Union?
Yeah, I don't know. Me and authority, we kind of, it's an interesting relationship. So even if Brexit had happened, I would have been like, I came here, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to find a way. No, to be honest, it was more of a question of long-term thinking, and the way that the course was structured, it didn't align with my long-term goals. And just thinking about it, you know, I mean, you would understand this. You have a family. So I started kind of thinking, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I see space? And, you know, everybody dreams of, I would say most people dream of this digital nomad life. Mm-hmm. And I've done that for the last 4 years. I was probably in an airplane more times than I was in my own apartment. And you just come to a point where you really do desire to have a base somewhere. Yeah. And I miss home. I mean, I haven't seen my family in 2 years. So for me, I've always wanted to move to Melbourne and settle down there and have my kind of base.
Not right now. Not right now, man.
No. Well, I was meant to be moving this week. I had everything ready. And then
you don't want to. I think I said that, right, when we were chatting on Facebook. I was like, good God, stay away right now. You don't want to be put straight back into stage 4 quarantine lockdown.
Let's not even go there. We're keeping the vibes positive here. But yeah, so that's kind of the long and short of it all.
Well, how did you get interested in languages then? Was that something that was obviously around you, multiple languages all the time? If you were, you know, born in Latvia, your parents and other relatives spoke Latvian, you came to Australia, you were surrounded by English speakers, then your mum married a Peruvian, so you were surrounded by Spanish. Was that the biggest sort of driver that led to your interest in learning many languages later on in life?
See, most people would think so, but for example, my sister had I'm not going to say a similar upbringing, but she was surrounded by multiple languages at home, and she just wants to speak English.
Yeah.
Love her to speak, but she just wants to speak English. So I would say that, you know, most people would think, oh, if you're surrounded by, or if you're in an environment that allows you to explore new languages, then you're automatically going to pick them up. But there is a very active element, and it has to come from within, and it has to come from you actually taking the initiative to go and learn and to study the languages. So I would say what inspired me was, as a child, traveling through lots of airports. I will say that was definitely something that it fascinated me. I remember just walking through multiple airports with my mom and thinking, why can't I understand these people? Where is this plane going? Wow. So there's a story that I've mentioned many times about my first encounter with someone at one of those McDonald's ball pits. And this Russian boy was throwing like those balls at me, and I said stop him in Latvian and English. He didn't understand me, so my mom taught me the Russian word, and I thought it was a superpower. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And in Adelaide, I went to a primary school that was like an IB school, so an international baccalaureate school, and I was actually in a new arrivals program. So the new arrivals program, for anyone who doesn't know or hasn't encountered it, is the kind of stream that you go into if you don't speak English. So I was in that for about 6 months, and then I learned very quickly. And they said, no, okay, we're moving her up a year. But in that time, you know, my best friend was Serbian, and we learned things from each other, and it was just a cool thing. It was a really cool thing to be able to, you know, dip into different languages and different cultures. So that was the start of it all.
It's funny, though, that you mentioned your sister sort of went the complete opposite direction, right? And do you think that part of that was that she saw it as the inverse of cool?
Perhaps. I think, well, my sister, also I have to say, my sister is 10 years younger than me. So we grew up in different generations, I'm going to say, roughly. But yeah, I guess, I don't know, there could be many factors, but she's more interested in sports. So her interests are gymnastics and and just other things. So she's not really that into languages. I mean, she likes Japanese. She's learning Japanese.
Oh, geez, just to make it easy. Jesus. Like, we'll just start with the most difficult language for English learners.
So the funny thing is, though, because at home we spoke a mixture of Spanish, Latvian, and English.
Yeah.
She can understand Spanish easily. She can speak a little bit, but it's just a fascinating little combination.
Well, my wife's from Brazil, so we speak Portuguese at home, and we're trying to raise our son to speak Portuguese. He gets English everywhere else, so I'm just like, and for my sake, let's just speak Portuguese at home. But when we... Yeah, obrigado, bom demais. But when we go out to parties, there are quite a lot of Brazilians in Australia, as you probably know, and especially women who end up marrying Australian guys and then having a family here, at least in the circle that I've, fallen into with a lot of Brazilians. And it seems like when the father is interested in the culture and starts learning the language, or the Australian native, and starts learning Portuguese, the kids will grow up accepting it. But there have been a few times that I've met half Brazilian kids, Brozzies, who,
I love it.
Yeah, they've just decided it's too embarrassing. Dad doesn't learn it. He doesn't speak Portuguese. I'm not. So, Mum, I'm just going to speak back to you in English. I'm not going to use Portuguese in public. It's embarrassing. So I was wondering if it was that kind of experience, because that's what I'm terrified of with Noah. I'm like, good God, please keep wanting to learn Portuguese. Don't get embarrassed. It's half your family doesn't speak English.
Yeah. You're going to do this for the team.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting. Like, at the moment, he doesn't have a choice. But yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so my sister actually, funnily enough, didn't speak any English until she was maybe 4 or 5 and started going to primary school and like kindergarten, because we just spoke Spanish at home, like when we were all together. So I think if she had been exposed to more of the culture and maybe more social opportunities with kids who were also Spanish speaking, she probably would have wanted to stick to it. But it was an on and off thing. So I don't know, maybe if you also went over to Brazil when it becomes possible again, and you'll be like, wow, okay, I need to speak it because nobody else here speaks anything else.
Well, I think that's going to be a big part of it. It's going to be taking him back to the culture to see it, being applied. How, it's just, at the moment, it's just what mum and dad speak at home, and it's weird because no one else speaks it when I go outside or see the rest of the family. But I can imagine if we take him to Brazil when he's younger, hopefully, if we can actually get in there, things will get a little better and he'll be motivated to do it, especially if he develops relationships, right? Because it's all about communication.
Relationships drive language learning. They honestly do. And they don't have to be romantic relationships, but
they're the best kind, though. If I'm honest.
They help a lot. Not gonna lie. They help a lot.
I think do you still have the same boyfriend who was a Russian speaker, if I can ask? Because that was the video that I last saw.
Oh, no. We broke up maybe, what year are we in? 2020. We broke up in 2018. So
okay.
Since then, there have been quite a few.
But the Russian's gone down a little bit, has it? Or
yeah, it has. Other languages have improved, but
yeah.
No, my last boyfriend was actually a polyglot, so we both spoke. He spoke like 8 languages as well. We're great friends still.
How did that work? If I can pause you on that, like, is it something where you met up, you went on a date, and you just switched through 8 languages, and then you were like, yeah, bam, we can do this. It's going to be efficient. I don't necessarily like you too much, but you speak 8 languages, so I don't have to leave the house now and I can practice.
No, actually, I'm the opposite. So when it comes to relationships, that's another area apart from my linguistic world that I've studied and dived deep into. So anything to do with psychotherapy. Yeah. So when it comes to relationships, that's not what they're built on. You can have the same interests, but you need to have those needs met, and you need to be able to have good communication. Need to understand, what do I actually want from a partner? What do they want? So we met in a very interesting way. We were at a conference, and I spoke on a panel discussion, and he thought actually I was super intimidating, to be honest. And so afterwards, there was another event on, and I was filming it, so I had my tripod and everything, and he was sitting on a couch next to me, and he bumped my tripod, and he apologized profusely. So I said, no, it's all good. But we were speaking in German because we were in Berlin at the time. And then after the whole event was over, I was packing up my camera, and he came up and apologized again. And we were speaking in German, and he thought I was German. I thought he was German until he saw my surname, and he said, and he just switched to Spanish, and he said, "Oh, you speak Spanish?" And I said, "Oh, you do too? Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm American." I said, "I'm Australian." So we actually our native languages were English, and it was this weird crossover. So yeah, and it was quite romantic. He ended up canceling his flight back that night to stay with me, and yeah. We're good friends now. We're really good friends, and we do some work together. So you'll see him in my next video. But yeah, all I can say is just because you speak the same languages doesn't mean it's going to be a good relationship romantically.
Yeah, well, I see that a lot of the time, especially obviously being in Australia right now. A lot of my friends are foreigners and they end up dating Australians. And it is interesting that it seems like Australians are a very hard bunch to encourage to learn foreign languages, right? Would you be able to talk about your experience, obviously spending a big chunk of your life here as someone who has learnt languages or spoken languages from a young age? What do you think it is with Australians and the sort of lack of bilingualism or multilingualism?
Well, if I had a very simple answer to that, I'd probably be on the education board.
Everyone would be bilingual.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember when I was in high school, I had an interview from one of our local newspapers done, and they asked me actually pretty much the same question. They said, "How come you're learning?" Like at the time, I was learning 3 at high school, and they asked me the same question and said, "Why do you think Australians don't really like to learn languages?" And I didn't know. So, I mean, it's quite similar in the UK, but I would say because English basically runs the Western world, it's seen as kind of like the superior language, like the lingua franca. So it is a lot easier for you to obviously get by and have all of your needs met just being an English speaker. Yeah. Obviously, you're also doing yourself a massive disservice culturally and, in terms of the opportunities that you open yourself up to, even if you're not aware of it. But yeah, I would say that it could also be the geographical factor that Australians, I mean, they do travel to Europe and they do travel to Bali and they travel.
Bali! What is that? Have you seen that meme where it's like, I got $1,000 compo. Bali!
Bali trip! Yeah, exactly.
It's a good cliche.
Yeah. My whole family has been to Bali except for me. So.
I've never been either. I'm so proud to say that I'm an Aussie that's never been to Bali. I've been to Indonesia, but I've never been to Bali.
Beautiful, beautiful. We can be part of that club.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think I want to. Yeah, there's just I'll go to Bali if I want to hang out with more Aussies than there are currently outside my house.
It's exactly the same thing here in the UK with, or in England with Marbella and like British people.
And Gibraltar, right, too, I think is...
Yeah, if you go to like any, like Marbella or Ibiza, like, as they say, they say like Ibiza, and I'm like, it's no.
It's Ibiza. Yeah.
It's Ibiza, mate. Get it right.
Man, I thought for years that place was in Mexico somewhere. That was such a... Yeah. I don't know why.
That was an island to me. This was like when I first heard about it, I was like, is this like a city in Spain? And like, no, it's like a party island. Oh, okay. But, yeah. So coming back to your question, I think, yeah, there's all of those factors that we mentioned probably play a role in terms of, like if you're in Australia, you're going to be staying in Australia for a while. Yeah. Like I've done the trip from Europe to Australia 5 times in 1 year, and it's just not as feasible as
5 times.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You get used to it.
Well, yeah, I guess you must be using it efficiently where you're studying the languages on the plane and you're like, whatever.
Yeah, there's a whole technique behind how to use that 24-hour flight time.
Yeah, you just stand up and you're like, "Sprechen Sie Dutch?" or Deutsch. So, and then the next language, and then you find someone, and you'll be like, "Sweet, that was efficient."
That has happened to me though, not to that extent, but where the person I've sat next to was speaking a language that I was learning. I'm like, oh yeah, let's. I love talking to people. That's probably one of the reasons why I also like languages. I just love to connect and communicate. So wherever I am, we're starting a conversation. That's it.
Regarding the Australia points that you made, I think you nailed it. It's just too easy to not learn a foreign language when you're in obviously a big country like this, where I think we have too much choice as well, and so there isn't one single good option. Because if you were to say go out in Melbourne, you're probably going to have hundreds of different languages if you walk around for the day. You know, you could probably pick people from all over the world, and so there's not, here's this country we're bordering and it makes geographical sense to learn that language. But also, it's so difficult. I get really envious of you guys listening or watching this video or podcast, where if you're learning English as a second language, it's almost like you were in a small pool of content. You know, imagine you're Icelandic. What have you got? Like 300,000 people in that country. They all speak like perfect English because they look outside and they get all of their entertainment, everything from the English speaking world. So I get very envious of how it's effectively, it opens up, it doesn't close down.
Yeah, no, that's quite a current topic actually in the language learning world, in terms of producing more content that is in foreign languages than in English. And it's a double-edged sword, because I've thought about doing that, and a lot of my content, most of my content is in English, for the pure reason that
it's going to reach everyone.
Yeah, everybody that follows me. Like, I have literally the whole world in my, like when you look at what countries are watching you, it's such a diverse selection. So I can't please everybody. Yeah. And just, you would know, like the amount of time it takes to do subtitles. I love you guys, but I can't put 20 languages.
Oh my God. Yeah, Jesus. I was thinking you were just thinking about doing the subtitles in one language, not 20 of them. My God.
Well, that takes time as well. That takes time as well. But, and I do just, sometimes I just say, you know what, whatever. Yeah. This video is going to be in Portuguese. This video is going to be in German. This is in Spanish. But it's tough, because it's just like it's a luxury, I think, as an English speaker to be able to make that content in another language. Whereas, as you were saying, for people who speak Icelandic, or who maybe, speak, let's say, Gujarati, or are from like more minority languages, they don't have a choice. They need, in order to be able to interact with the world as it is today, and align with the way that globalization is heading, they need to speak English, unfortunately and fortunately.
Well, and there's no other clear-cut choice, right? You could pick something like Spanish or Arabic or Chinese, but again, it would just limit your reach significantly, right?
Yeah. Well, we could start a Brazilian Portuguese movement, Pete.
Oh man, I've already tried. I was thinking about it, but it's just a matter of having the hours in the day to be able to do it. Because I think I noticed that you said somewhere you were starting a channel, or had started a channel in Portuguese, right, in order to practice your Portuguese, which was the reason that I'd started mine originally. But I think I did like 2 videos, and then I was like, this is so much effort, and
it's worth it. You could start like an Instagram handle, like in Portuguese.
True.
It works. I mean, I do business in Portuguese as well, so it's kind of everything. I have my reasons for wanting to improve it, and I think coming back to the previous question in terms of Australians and language learning, I think, as you said, it's too easy not to. Yeah. Like, it's too easy to not learn another language. But I would say it's, in terms of the Australians I've met and I studied with and stuff, unless they want to become a global citizen and their work really requires them to speak another language, they don't see the need to learn another one.
Well, I think it's difficult too, right? When I think the average Australian would be like the average anyone learning a foreign language, where it's difficult for the best of us from the beginning. And you would imagine that if I went outside and met the average Aussie in the street and said, you could learn French, just start, like, do this, do that, and get going. Anyone they meet for probably the first 6 months who speaks French is going to kick their ass in English. Like, the balance is so offset because French speakers have probably had experience since they were little kids at school in learning English. And so as well, it must be very difficult to have that motivation to be like, all right, I just have to keep pushing. Like, let's keep practicing French. I know you speak really good English, but let's just keep pushing.
Yeah. But what do you think? Do you think that it would make a bigger difference if, say, in primary schools, languages were pushed more? Or
I think so. I think even if they don't learn, I was really appreciative. I learned Japanese in primary school and I can literally say konnichiwa and sayonara and, watashi wa Peter, and that's about it. I learned Indonesian when I moved primary schools, and then I did French and Chinese at high school and then French at uni, which I failed. And then I learned Portuguese later in life. And, but I think from a younger age, especially in primary school and high school, it was good to do it, even if I had just completely forgotten everything, because it just gave me a more global understanding of the world, of different cultures, the fact that there are different people that speak different languages who think differently because of the languages that they speak and the way that those languages are grammatically formed. So I think, it's kind of like my dad always says when we talk about doctors who end up finishing their degrees and then just quitting and doing something else, which was what I did. Not a doctor, but a PhD. I finished that and was like, screw this. I'm always like, I feel really guilty because the government and myself spent so much time studying this thing, but I'm not using it. And my dad's always like, yeah, but the world can use, intelligent people. So even if you're not using it.
That's the thing. I mean, I studied law for 4 years. Did I become a lawyer? No.
Yeah.
And people often ask me, do you regret all this time? But the thing is, I think that, well, this is my psychological brain switching on.
Bring it on.
But everybody in life is on their own timeline.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you do, but you need to understand that it's all about learning and it's a process and it's a journey. So all of these things that you decide to study, all of the, domains that you go into, whether it's in your part-time job as a teenager or in your first job or when you're doing your PhD or master's or whatever, it actually doesn't matter so much, I think anyway, as to what you pick, but you're always going to come away from that with a certain skill set and it's going to challenge you in a way that you couldn't have foreseen. So the same thing, with me moving to England, the way I thought it was going to go and the way it went are two different things. Neither one is right or wrong. Neither one is good or bad. And I think we're too quick to categorize things in a very binary way. So this is good, this is bad. This is a positive thing to study. This is a negative thing to study. But I think that, there's a lot of underlying fear actually behind that, a fear of judgment, a fear of shame, a fear of being blamed for things, a fear of failure. All of that, I think, goes into people sticking with things that don't satisfy them.
Exactly.
But if you can, there's a great quote, if you're suffering for 1,000 days, why would you want to suffer for 1,001? So if you're doing something and you know this is not fulfilling you and you're trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of yourself, whether it's cultural expectations, societal expectations, expectations of yourself that you maybe have set the bar that high, I think that it's worth just questioning that and understanding you're not going to live forever. And no, it's not going to change overnight. I mean, I know when I decided to, kind of just take the leap, start my own business and go into the entrepreneurial world. And I called my mom on her birthday actually and said, hey mom, I'm quitting law school. No one would have expected that from me because I was always the goody two shoes, perfect student with straight A's, went to uni at 16, does everything well and proper by the books. And I was like, no, I'm doing my own thing. Goodbye. And it was hard. I had a lot of people who were against me, people who didn't believe in me, but it passed with time,
What do you think about keeping those sorts of people around as well?
Well, I would say my opinion has changed a bit. So when I did that, I basically went on a full-on cull of my social circle because I do very much believe that the people you have in your inner circle and who you interact with the most, they influence you. Whether you
100%.
want to or not, they're going to influence you. And it's the classic. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's very cliche, but it's very true. I was reflecting on this last night, actually. And
well, to pause you there, sorry to pause you there, but it is so true. I had a lot of friends when I was out of high school that I look back on, and they were doing drugs, or they were drinking too much, or they would just hang out and do nothing, just watch YouTube. And I remember that was just what everyone in our group would do, because everyone in our group was doing that. But then when I went off to university and started surrounding myself with different people, all of a sudden the same kind of motivation to do things can be pushed in a really positive direction when you guys are. Yeah, exactly. So it is so true that, you are the sort of average, not necessarily of 5 people, but of the people that you spend the most time with, because obviously you're going to want to impress them, want to develop relationships with them, want to learn from them, want to teach them. And so those subjects that they're interested in are going to affect you as well.
100%. Yeah. And that's why, you don't necessarily have to have those people or the influences in your life be in person.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that I interact with at the moment, especially, is online, but they still influence me if I'm having a 3-hour conversation with them, or if the things that I'm reading and seeing on my Facebook feed or on Instagram, all of that impacts you because, our mirror neurons, we're going to mirror everybody and everything that we see in terms of our interactions. So, yeah, I just kind of started going to more events and interacting with people who were on the same wavelength and who wanted to, achieve big things in life and who were ambitious and who cared about making a difference in the world. And that just became the norm.
Yeah.
So
it's weird, right? Yeah. Once that happens, when all of a sudden people have your back and they're like, you would say, I'm quitting law school. And they're like, yeah, hell yeah, girl, you got this. We're going to help you. We want you to succeed. But that's the thing. That's what I meant, I guess, with that question of, did you get rid of those people? Because who the hell wants to tell their family members or closest friends that they have a plan or a dream or something to be shot down and say, oh, that's a dumb idea, you'll fail. It's like, what the hell? Even if that's true, even if you think that, how is that going to help?
That doesn't support me. And that's the thing. I was very cutthroat, I would say, with the people and the way that I got rid of them. Even my grandmother, I don't speak to my grandmother anymore because she was a massive negative influence. And, I have the belief that family really is chosen. Yes, you do have a blood family. Like I adore my mom and I adore my sister, but it's also because they provide positivity in my life and they support. Why would you want to, exactly as you just said, why would you want to keep people around or have close contact to people who really just bring you down and who are energy vampires? My old mentor used to call them energy vampires.
100%.
And yeah, because everybody, I think, or most of the time, people want you to live up to the, let me put this right, they want you to live up to the story that they have about you.
Yeah.
Or they want you to reassert that, yep, this is the identity I have of Pete, for example. You can't do anything outside of that box. But I think it's love and care from the people around you should be unconditional in the sense of, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to support you. I'm going to advise you, yes, but I love you enough to let you go and be free and do your thing.
When you imagine that's probably how the most successful people in the world end up getting raised, successful not necessarily in terms of money, but in terms of happiness and just what they enjoy and everything. It's more their parents or their family or their friends have always been there and they're like, we'll be here if you fall, but exactly. Have at it. So
great thing, great jump off that.
I know, man. I feel like this is a psychology podcast.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be silly. I love this sort of topic anyway, so it's good. That's why I like, just deviating and going wherever. But bringing it back to languages, I've just realized, so you were, I imagine, raised effectively to speak 3 languages as your native languages, Latvian, Spanish, and English, and then learnt the other ones later in life. So you're almost multilingual, like a sequential and a simultaneous multilingual, where you've been raised learning these languages from the start, multiple languages from birth, but then later in life you've learnt languages sequentially. Has that impacted the way in which you speak them, or how they sit in your brain or anything? Does it do the languages of English, Spanish, and Latvian sit differently within you than, say, German or French, which I assume you've learnt later on in life?
It's an interesting question because so I say this also to all of my students, like even with English, I continuously learn new things on a daily basis, with Latvian as well. And even though they were my first languages, I do need to do like upkeep. Yeah. Otherwise the skills kind of fade, or the ease and the fluidity that I can express my thoughts in, it kind of fades a little bit. So my German is actually far better than my Latvian and my Spanish, but for various reasons. But the difference, like in terms of the feeling and psychology of it all, because Latvian and English were my first languages, they are basically just like the factory setting. Yeah. I can be tired, I can have whatever going on, it's effortless. I mean, obviously, it's the morning here, so my English probably is all over the place.
It's fine.
So, but that's the thing. It's almost like I need to be primed a little bit. So the last language I spoke last night was, I think, either Portuguese or Spanish. So waking up this morning, my brain's like, the English needs to be set up a little bit. But still, it's very natural. And I would say that's the biggest difference, that it's a little bit more effortless than, for example, with French or with Portuguese. I can feel that my brain or my concentration is a bit more active.
Yeah, I remember, do you know Kangaroo English and Christian Saunders? He's an English teacher online. So he's got a YouTube and he does a lot of really interesting stuff where he dives deeper into linguistics and interviewing linguists and professors. But he did a video on learning multiple languages and was saying that it's not like flicking a switch, but it's more like you've got a bucket with multiple colored balls sitting on the surface, and that at any one time your brain has to kind of push all but one color below the surface. But obviously, maybe English is the most buoyant, right? Or Latvian is the most buoyant, easy to come up. You don't have to shove your fist in the barrel and be like, where's that goddamn French ball?
I love that. No, exactly. That reminds me as well. I read in an article somewhere, I think, of about bilingualism. And it said that if you're bilingual, it's actually both languages are active at the same time. But people you'll often find, I do this with my mum all the time. When we speak, we switch between Latvian, English, and Spanish sometimes, but it's mostly Latvian and English. And so we have that code switching going on. Yeah. Actually, if you want to really perfect, whatever perfect means, a language, then it's almost like going to the gym. You need to consistently train to use all the words in that one language, because otherwise, what happens is one is always at the forefront. So let's say the last time I spoke about languages, let's take languages, was in German. And now we're having this interview in English. I'm going to have all of the German words here at the front of my mind, like, take me, come on, fresh, take me. And then the English was like, yep, I'm coming. I just woke up. Give me my coffee first. I'm coming. So that's kind of what happens in one's brain. Man.
Like to swear, I fucking hate that aspect of speaking multiple languages, because of the amount of brain farts that I have when I'm just sitting there and I'll be talking in English, but the Portuguese word comes to me, or I'll be speaking in Portuguese and the English word. Yeah, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's really irritating, because it's kind of like you're running along the road and all of a sudden there's mud in front of you and you're just like, what? Where did that come from? Where did
that come from? Exactly.
But it is so true with the code switching, because even my wife and I do that, where it's like your brain just picks the path of least resistance, right? And so if it's just like the closest thing for me to grab is a vine in English, and then there's a Portuguese one, and then there's an English one again, it just goes in and out, because your brain's just like, I just need to get the message across, and I know the person understands, so just whatever. Yeah. Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, I think it depends on the context as well, the scenario that you're in. So, for example, with my ex or my friend David, we kind of switch into German, English, and Spanish kind of just easily, and that's what we do. But obviously, if you're then in a scenario where somebody else is in the conversation and they don't speak one of those languages, then you kind of have to like, okay, I'm picking up the weights. Let's do this.
Far out, yeah. Especially with multiple languages, I imagine. Like that's one thing with my wife and I and the rest of my family, because obviously we can speak in Portuguese and that feels more natural. It's like my brain is just used to seeing her and just using Portuguese. And then when I talk to my parents, I don't use Portuguese. I know not to.
Yeah.
And so we just don't end up, speaking both languages in front of them. We just switch to English and we just know, all right, these people don't speak Portuguese. So it is funny. But I was going to say, what was I going to say? I've got questions here from some of my followers, and I had one from Armin that's kind of related to this. He said, sometimes I end up using a word in Farsi or even a dialect from South Iran in the middle of an English sentence. Do you have the same issue in your languages? And how do you manage to try and keep them separate?
Ooh, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that an active thing that's happening, or is he just I assume it's some point. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a guy. Yeah.
Okay. What was it? Ahmed?
Armin.
Yeah. Hello, Ahmed. First of all, it does happen, but I don't think it happens very often. I guess there are so many factors that it depends on. Is it a word that is typically just like used in Farsi and English doesn't have such a good equivalent? So I do that with German all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it could be a confidence thing as well, but sometimes I will say the German word and then I'll explain it to the person later. For example, yesterday I was watching a show with my Aussie friend and I said, oh my God, I feel so much Schadenfreude right now.
Oh, everyone should know what Schadenfreude is. Like,
they don't, and it's a German word. So I said, this is what it means, but it just fits in this situation better. So I think, I don't know, I personally, if you ask me, I wouldn't make such a big deal out of it. It happens. And if you want to change it, just be aware of, okay, in that situation, this happened. Next time I'm going to focus more. I'm just going to be curious and change it up. So it does happen to me, but not that often. I think it's more of I'm aware of it or how I use my languages. So
you've got to explain Schadenfreude to the listeners that are German.
Schadenfreude. I could give out a whole list of great German words that English needs to adopt. So Schadenfreude, I'm sure like we know what is cringeworthy when something is super cringy or when someone is having an embarrassing moment that we feel their embarrassment. That's Schadenfreude. But you get the joy out of what somebody else.
I thought it was that it's not, you don't feel bad for the person. It's kind of like you feel good that happened to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just made up of the word Schade and Freude. So Freude is like happiness and joy, and Schade is when something is a pity. So you're like,
pity joy.
Pity joy, yeah. You pity someone, but you're secretly laughing because for their misfortune, basically.
This sort of dovetails well with a question that I had, a random question for you. With all the languages that you've learned, have you found that there are certain words, expressions, or phrases in English or Australian English that you find difficult to translate in for any other foreign language?
You know what, actually? I wouldn't say translate, but I need to think for a little bit.
What about bogan?
Oh yeah, actually that's a good one. I always kind of associate it. So it depends on who I'm speaking to. So in Germany, when I called someone, or if I would talk about the word bogan, I explain it with the next equivalent in German, which is Aussie. So someone who is Aussie. To an American, I would be like, yeah, it's kind of like a redneck, but like a hillbilly, like something like that. So that is definitely one. I think I've gotten phrases or expressions that I thought were just kind of universal in English. Like I said here in England, I said, stop paying me out.
Yes.
And I thought it was a British thing because we have the same, we basically have the same language.
Yeah.
And they were like, what?
I've had that same exact experience with paying someone out. Don't pay me out. Why are you paying me out? Leave me alone. Stop paying me out.
Like a prostitute?
Whoa! You're making fun of me for being a prostitute?
And we could take that down many different avenues, but yeah, I think that's probably one.
That means to make fun of people, by the way, guys, to tease people, to pay someone out.
To take the mickey out of someone, they know that
They
one.
would have known that one. That's from them.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I definitely think bogan is one of them. I can't think of any at the moment.
I was sitting there the other night, and my son loves to come up and drink whatever I have. He wants some, but he always backwashes. I'm always like, you little bastard, you just spat back in my drink, backwashed it. And I was saying to Kel, I'm like, como eu posso falar backwash in Portuguese? Like, how can I say backwash to backwash? And she's like, what the hell's that? And I'm like, it's when you've drunk some water, and then you've let the water go back out of your mouth, back into the drink, whatever drink it is.
Little bits.
And there's food or there's saliva, you've backwashed it. And she's like, she told me the equivalent of spat in your drink. And I'm like, no, that's different. That's like someone's walked up and just gone, yeah. So I was thinking, far out, maybe backwash is something that we can't easily translate in other languages. I mean, you probably know better than me if you can do this in German or French. But
I can just think of sexual phrases, but we're thinking that are a little untranslatable. Anyway, I would say that Portuguese actually has a lot more of those, just from my experience.
My God.
I have to ask like some of my co-workers, I would call them, with Brazilian company, and I'm like, hold on, what is show de bola? What is this?
Yeah.
What is this word? Why are you using this word here? And especially with like amorous phrases, you know, they have like, a gente tá ficando, namorando. They have this whole spectrum of what situation are you having romantically with someone. Yeah. And I'm like, gosh, in English we just say, I'm seeing someone.
I'm sleeping with someone.
Girlfriend, sleeping with someone. We're married or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's a very limited spectrum.
It's the beautiful thing about language, though. I remember that learning those in Portuguese, you know, ficar is like a verb that effectively means to stay or to become. But it can be used to mean like you're casually having sex with someone, right? But it's not official.
Yeah.
And I was just like, isn't that just like fuck buddies? Or like, I was like trying to work out, how do I explain that? But yeah, it is really cool. I love that aspect. There was another one. There was a really good one that was like Picadas Galaxias. Have you heard of that one? My Brazilian listeners are going to be laughing their asses off. Picadas Galaxias effectively means, I think, dick of galaxies. And it's something really good. It's just something really good. And I remember hearing that and just being like, what? And it seems like Portuguese is such a more sexual language. A lot more expressions 100%. Are related to sex. They have words for everything, you know, different body parts. Every second word that I mispronounce, Kel laughs, my wife, because I've said another word that means vagina or penis in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I just be like,
oh my gosh. I need to send you one of my videos. Maybe I don't know. About what was it? Dating in Brazil or dating Brazilians.
No, I haven't. You'll have to send it to me.
I'll send it. I think you'll laugh. It's one of my favorite videos that I've ever made because it's hilarious. I did it with another YouTuber who's a Brazilian YouTuber, but he lives in Canada. Gabriel Polyglota, and he came to Berlin and we did some filming in Paris and in Berlin, and it was just awesome. We went to the YouTube space and just I'll send it to you. It's a great video.
Here is part number 2. So, switching gears, do polyglots have a special ability to just learn languages? You know, are you guys like mutants from you know, the comic, except your special power is just obtaining languages incredibly quickly?
No, not at all. It's a skill. It's just like any other skill. It takes practice. It takes time to develop, and I think a lot of people don't want to hear that. They think that we somehow have the ability to go to sleep and have a language downloaded overnight. But I mean, if you really dig deep into what every polyglot has done, it's been years of putting effort in, using the language, making mistakes. You know, for me to get to the level of German that I got to, I did 4 years at university. I studied it in high school for 2 years. I lived in Germany. I worked in a company in Germany. So I just put myself into all of these uncomfortable situations in order to elevate my language skills, and then repeated that for multiple languages. So it is, it's a process, but I think that what all polyglots have in common as well is that they found out how they learn best. And we were talking about psychology before, but all of that matters. It doesn't matter if you specialized in, let's say, engineering, or like Luca Lampariello was a specialist in engineering, So he's taken a lot of elements from other domains and applied that to learning. So I'm passionate about psychology, and I see so many, kind of crossovers between just various areas of life. And what it comes down to is learning how to learn and understanding how your memory works, how you as a person and your personality work, and just testing a lot of things. And then you find your way and you reapply that.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because it is so much about learning yourself and learning how you learn best, more so than, that you have an aptitude for learning languages. Because I can imagine tomorrow you could throw in your hat and just say, no more languages. Instead, I'm going to learn sports. And you've got an arsenal of tools at your disposal to be like, I know how I learned. I'm just going to implement A, B, C, and we're just going to go through one sport for 2 years, then we'll do another one, and then another one, and I need to maintain them. And so it is so interesting how polyglots tend to be expert learners, not expert language learners, right?
Exactly. I mean, speaking of sports, I play competitive tennis as well, and I sing, and I do a bunch of other things, and people are like, hold on, you can't do this one thing, like these 10 different things. You can do one thing. No. That's, I think a lot of individuals limit themselves with their own beliefs, and
they probably want it to be true too, right? It's a lot easier to say, that's bullshit. That could never happen. I could never do that, because then you don't have to confront and accept the fact that you are actually just saying, I don't want to do that. I could do it. Exactly. I have the ability to, but I can't be bothered.
Yeah, exactly. It's, if you just reword it, you're very right. You're saying, I don't want to put in the effort, so I'm going to take the easy route, and I'm going to, make fun of everybody else or spread negativity because I don't want to switch the lens and look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm actually not doing as much as I could in my life, or I'm not using my own capabilities and my brain and everything to the best that I could be.
So can you give me a rundown of the languages that you speak and how and where and when you sort of learnt them, like a sort of quick timeline?
Okay.
I know this only gets harder and harder the more languages that you learn, so it's easier to get it done now, right? Like,
you gotta get it out of the way. Oh my gosh! So I'm gonna leave out the languages I've dabbled in, because that's gonna add a whole other 4 more series, or
the tail trails off the end of that.
Exactly, like sequels. That's the word I was looking for. So we've got Latvian and English. That obviously, from living in both countries, family, etc. And then Spanish came in with my stepdad, and then I had Spanish actually in primary school and in high school. So in high school, I went to it was a special language school. So I applied to go there because I was like, yes, languages. So you could study 2. And I kind of, played the system a bit and ended up doing 3. So I started with Spanish and French. And French I actually fell in love with when I was in my last year of primary school. So for you guys, I think that's year 6. In South Australia, 7. So I was in year 7, and I just found this book in the library in French, and I could speak Spanish, so I could recognize a lot of the words. I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And then it was an obsession. I bought these like DVDs or CDs and whatever, and decided to, learn on my computer every weekend, and kind of, I went to the library and picked up all these books. And so when I got into high school, I was like, yes, I'm definitely doing French. And then because of my schedule and everything, in year 10, I kind of just went to the German teacher and I said, please, 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 can I take German? And no one had ever really done like 3 languages at high school. I said, no, like I wanted to. So I had to get like permission from the principal and everything. And so they put me into the German class. But this was towards the end of year 10 coming into year 11. And everyone in the class had already been doing German for like 3 years. And I was like, I was just in love with the language. So I did everything possible to kind of not so much catch up, but just be, have the skills that everybody else needed to have. So I did for my kind of ATAR, or my final, high school leaving courses, however we would describe it, or my subjects.
That would be, I think, VCE exams and everything in Victoria, or at least it was when I was there. So I don't know. And then there's HSC in New South Wales and whatever. It's different in every state, guys.
I just know there's like SATAC, which is the Australian, like, or South Australian kind of university scoring organization. I don't know, but you get an ATAR, so which is like that score that allows you to go to uni. So I had German, French, and Spanish, and English, maths, legal studies, whatever. And then I got a scholarship when I was 16 to go to uni and do French. So I started, kind of everything early. So my uni career began then, and I did French and German. Then I went into law school, and I always knew, I'm going to go on exchange in Germany. That's like, in my third year, that's what I'm doing. So I went and did that, and I was very adamant about the fact that I'm living in a German household. I'm going to, study in German. So I took law subjects in German, and I was in the library every day for the first few weeks for like 2 hours, not only learning the content and watching the slides and stuff, but the vocabulary. I'm like, how am I going to express these contractual terms in German? But I loved the challenge. I loved it. And it really, helped me improve my German massively.
So that's a big part, right? It's just enjoying the challenge, not shying away from discomfort.
Exactly. And I mean, then in that year, I traveled to Italy. So I started learning Italian just there and using it, in cafes and things like that. And then, so with all the languages, I've kind of dabbled in them previously, and then I picked them up for whatever other reason. So then Russian I did because I did a course at uni in Russian, and then my ex-boyfriend came along, and that gave me more incentive to improve because his family spoke more Russian than German. And what else came next? So Portuguese is an interesting story. I actually never wanted to learn Portuguese. I thought it was weird. And in this whole time of me doing
Brazilians, don't turn off yet. Don't turn off. Stay.
No. I adore it. Like, I think in a past life, I was probably Brazilian.
It's a hidden gem, right? I was the same. I remember hearing it and being like, man, this is like a really whiny version of Spanish. Jesus.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like going from white bread to, wholemeal bread. You start eating wholemeal all the time. Yeah, and then you're like, I can't eat white bread again. Spanish to me now, no offense, all the Spanish speakers, it misses all of the that you get from Portuguese. So I fell in love with it as well after I started learning it.
Yeah, I love them both, but definitely I would say, so I had some Brazilian students who signed up to learn German with me in Mannheim, so back in Germany. And the more that, they would talk about their life and their culture in class, I was like, you know what? This is a great language. And so I started it, left it for a while, just because I was so focused on, building up my business and doing stuff. You can't do everything at once, people. And then
I have to ask you about time management after this.
And then it just kind of, I got sucked into the Brazilian culture. All of my friends in Berlin were Brazilian, or most of them. And so I started going to all the like parties and events and things, and just found myself, at dinners with friends. It was very much, I think, at the core of it all, my languages have been always inspired by my friendships and people. And I know that if I don't have some sort of friendship connected to a language, I'm not going to progress very far in it.
I think that's a very, very strong way of having your motivations set up. It's a good base, right? Because it's like, I remember when I was learning French really, really hard after 10 years of being out of high school and studying on my own. And I remember one of my colleague friends who's from India was just like, why don't you learn Hindi? And I'm like, I don't know any Indian speakers. I have no, like, it's not that I don't like in Hindi or really don't want to learn it or have no interest, but I have no one in my inner circle. Whereas I know a lot of French people, and I did it at high school, so I had some experience with it. And so it was big. I had no motivation. Or the same with Mandarin Chinese. It was like, it's just if I found myself with 10 friends that were all of a sudden from, all over the place in China, I'd be like, all right, now I've got a lot of reasons to knuckle down and tackle, the Goliath that is Chinese.
Exactly. That's the thing. People ask me this all the time. Why don't you do this language or that?
Mm-hmm.
I said, I always say I will at some point probably, but right now I'm focused on the quality rather than the quantity of the languages. And I don't need to, I don't need certain languages right now. If you're, if you feel what's the word that I'm looking for? Help me out, Pete.
Just use it in whatever language comes to you at first.
Offended. That's the one. If you feel offended by that, that is not my problem.
Yeah.
Why don't you go learn Latvian? That is actually one of my responses. It sounds a bit sassy, but I'm like, well, why don't you learn Latvian? And I will go and pick that language up, whatever language it is, and then we can chat. But no, I totally agree with you, and I think that this all comes back to understanding how you are as a learner. So I have friends who are polyglots as well, and they are very much introverted learners in the sense of they are driven by their own kind of inner principles and inner motivations. I'm an extroverted person, so I need that social aspect paired with, of course, my own learning time and doing that, actual focused study. But I need to have a bigger picture motivation as to why I'm learning this language. Where is it going to take me? Am I going to use it in my work? Am I going to have friends that I can practice with and get to know the culture? But really that social aspect is very closely tied into my own intrinsic motivation.
So how does one become a legit polyglot? Because there seem to be a lot of posers out there. I have a...
Oh my gosh, I haven't heard the word poser in so long.
just pulled it out.
I love it.
So I won't drop any names, but it definitely sort of grinds my gears when I see...
This is like the tea of the language world. Spill the tea.
I don't know. It's one of those things. It's a chip on my shoulder where I see a lot of wannabe polyglots who learn enough to be able to portray themselves as if they were legit, fluent in 8 languages, but to people who are very ignorant of those languages. And so what does it actually take? Because I feel like that's the low-hanging fruit. I can learn to probably be conversational, at least, I'm from here, I have 2 sisters, this is my name, in 10, 20 languages. But what does it actually take for someone like yourself who is legitimately interested in having an incredibly high language skill, in all the languages that you speak? What does it actually take to do and maintain that?
It's a shame, first of all, to touch on the point of, the poses and stuff. I think it's a shame that the term polyglot, or this idea of being a multilingual person, has to some extent become something super ego-driven. I think it used to bother me a lot, obviously being in the space, that it just started to be all about the quantity and showing off and being like, oh yeah, look at me, I can do this. I understand that, and I think that if you have a skill, I am all for pushing people to express themselves and to really just show off their skills and be like, yeah, you've reached something. And exactly as you said, it's when it becomes purely a facade and something on the surface level,
ego driven, as you were saying.
It used to bother me, and then I just realized, you know what, I'm focused on my own path. And I still get that, people, because I don't know if you've seen any, I'm in ads everywhere now. So
I've seen the Babble ads.
Yeah.
That was how I first found you.
Oh my gosh. Some of them have over 1 million views. And so I went from in such a short amount of time, from, okay, a hater comment here and there, whatever, to all this criticism. I know I'm diverting slightly from the question, but I promise I'll come back. We need to set the tone here.
Do it. Go for it.
And you know what? At the end of the day, I think stick to your own path, each to their own. Whatever these people do, it doesn't concern me. That's their life. If I think that if you are genuine and you know that you are putting in the work behind the scenes, You're not going to be bothered about making appearances. You're not going to be bothered about, I need to prove something to other people. I don't feel like I need to prove something. Are my languages perfect? No. But every single person has a completely different idea about what it means to be fluent. And fluency is based on so many different aspects. It's some people are super fluent in everyday talk, like in Latvian, for example. I can get by in any situation. Ask me to go and
Talk about
deliver a court case in Latvian. Oh my gosh, let me study for a day. And I mean, even with English speakers, if you go to a mechanic and you've never touched a part of a car, and they're going to be telling you that you're cool.
You don't see your blind spots, right? You don't really appreciate how much you actually don't know of the language that you speak naturally. Yeah.
And the more that anybody who becomes, an expert in a field, they know the more you know about something, the more you realize you don't know. So what it takes, I would say language learning at its core, so becoming a polyglot was the question. So I would say, first of all, for anybody who wants to become a polyglot, don't do it for just the title. I don't think you should ever do anything for the title. I never wanted to actually, I didn't even know what a polyglot was. I just liked languages and I thought, yeah, I'm going to learn 5. I was happy with my 5. And then I thought,
and then I got greedy.
and then I got greedy. No, but even now, I'm very open about this. Like, yes, I say I speak 8, but for the purposes of let's say doing business in a language and delivering talks and making videos, there are 6 of them that I'm like super confident in. And even with all of those, there are going to be blind spots that I have, or I'll forget a word and I'll have to look it up. But that's normal. So I would say you need to have a kind of long-term goal and a long-term vision to understand that this isn't going to happen overnight. And you need to know that, ask yourself, what is my why? If you're passionate about lots of languages and you're like, I want to do like 5 at once, I wouldn't recommend that. Like, I would say, what is your focus right now? Why, you keep reminding yourself as to why do you want to learn these? And it's going to change as well. So why I picked French at university was because at the time I wanted to work in the EU as a lawyer linguist. So I thought, okay, French is one of the requirements, so I'm going to keep it up. If I hadn't had that goal at the time, I probably honestly would have dropped French. But something has always kept bringing me back to the French language, and I do love it. But there are different goals, and also right now I'm not focused on improving like Russian or Italian because I don't have a need to. I will at some point. So I'm not stressed about that, and I don't care what anybody else says because I know my own goals and I know myself. And I think with everybody listening as well, like, just know your own goals and understand why you're doing something, and it doesn't matter what other people's judgments are. At the end of the day, they're not going to live life for you. You're living life for yourself. So, just be inspired by what inspires you, I guess, like by the languages that you love, and just keep going.
Well, it's kind of a shallow goal, I guess, to just be like, I just want to be able to speak this language. And it's like, you could go deeper. Yeah. You can find better motivations than that. Deeper, like
that. Anything like superficial doesn't last very long. It's the reason why, people, for example, in terms of careers, money doesn't drive careers. Money doesn't drive people to go into a certain career. It does for some, and you see that they hate their life and they hate their job and they end up taking drugs every weekend because they are not living out what actually fulfills them or where their purpose lies. So the same thing with languages, I could learn, let's say, Arabic because it's one of the most spoken languages, but it doesn't fit into my life right now. I know a little bit. I do like the language. But maybe in the future, there's going to be an opportunity where I see, oh, okay, there's a window here. This is really going to be a beneficial language. I've got motivation. I've got people to support me. Let's do it. But you can't do everything at once.
Sort of right time, right place sort of thing then.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the questions from Abdel Rahman. He was wondering if you spoke Arabic. So you just answered
I can just say, like, the very, very basics. Like, I know like Wahyat Allah, which is like a oh my God phrase, and then Salam alaikum.
Yeah, alaikum salam.
Ana ismi Lina.
So do you have any languages that are like real, goals one day that you just sort of like, oh, I really hope that the fates align and this one will be something that I can learn? Is there any that sort of sits there that's just for whatever reason you just like, oh man, I hope that comes into my sights?
I would say, well, I've started to learn Mandarin, so I do think there's going to be a time.
Enjoy. It's hard.
I don't say anything is hard because I think that you like prime yourself to
very true.
See all the difficult sides of it. Yeah, I think Mandarin is probably that language. I would love to one day I'm gonna be able to speak it. Reading is a whole other story. We'll get there, but I definitely I would say Mandarin and even Arabic. I do think Arabic is a beautiful language. I went to Qatar actually 2 years ago, and that was a very cool experience. And I thought if I spend some time in an Arabic speaking country, then that's gonna do me good.
I would love to learn some of those languages, but I just appreciate the investment in terms of time, and you kind of have to go full ball, right? There's no learn Chinese in 3 months. It's not going to happen.
No,
exactly.
One of my friends that I went to high school with, we were in Spanish class in year 8 together, and her for me, what was German was Mandarin for her. So you've got to imagine, she is, I think, originally of Irish descent, pale skin, red hair, and she speaks Mandarin Chinese fluently.
Does she have a YouTube channel?
No.
Because there's this girl that's been coming up all over the place. That's this redheaded chick.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, that speaks Mandarin really well. But yeah, sorry. Anyway, keep going.
Oh, good. And when she was in China, she just, was interacting with the locals. Everyone thought she was this foreigner, and then she just comes out with this beautiful Chinese. And her boyfriend is from Taiwan as well, and so she's learned, I think, a bit more of Cantonese and stuff. Amazing. But it took her, how many years? All of high school, so 5 years, plus university, so 3 or 4 years, plus now adult life.
Yep.
So it's an investment, as you said. It really is an investment, and you've got to just focus on the now as well and not be thinking too far ahead, because you're just going to be overwhelmed.
Well, this ties in with the next question that I had. Many people sort of see language learning as a start-finish, building a house kind of process. How I learned French, as if you did it in 3 months and then finish, done. But I feel like it's more like fitness, right? Where you can get there. It takes months. It takes years. It's a permanent thing that sort of needs to be a part of your life. How do you maintain the languages that you have in order to avoid losing your gains, sort of like staying fit or capable of multiple sports?
Yes. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because as somebody who was an absolute lover of fitness as well, I do draw a lot of parallels between the two. So with languages, you're completely right. And I think that's been the underlying tone of all of the answers that we've just kind of given throughout the whole episode. It is a process. You will never, even in your native language, you're going to keep learning new things, because slang is going to come up, or expressions and whatnot. Languages also change all the time. So in terms of how I maintain my languages, it's a bit of a mix of, I've created a life that involves languages. So obviously the friends that I have, all of my closest friends live in multiple places. So I speak multiple languages with them, or they're from a variety of backgrounds. So on a weekly basis, in terms of my social interactions, I will have phone calls in French, in Spanish, in German, in English, Latvian, obviously with my mum. And then through social media, I'll be interacting with comments and making videos in all of these languages. I'll have, with the Brazilian company that I'm collaborating with, our messages and emails are in Portuguese, and then other emails are in Portuguese, so things like that. And then I'll have more of a, if I can sense, okay, this is a language that I'm not doing very much for, I can feel it kind of, becoming a bit rusty, then I will actively seek out opportunities. So either book a class online, or start making more videos in that language, or even like with the French course I'm doing now, that's quite intensive. So really just, seeking out opportunities to practice them, balanced out with just either hobbies or leisurely things where the languages are ingrained in that. Because I'm all about efficiency, people. I'm not one that you will not hear me say, yep, create a block of 3 hours for yourself. I know it maybe works for some people if you're focusing on one language and you just have like one space of time a week. And I know, especially if you have a family and stuff, it's obviously not that easy. But I think integrating languages as much as possible in already like pre-existing hobbies or pre-existing life situations. So people always think it's a difficult thing, but literally 2 days ago, I was at a cafe and the waitress had like a nice accent, and I asked her, I was like, where are you from? And she's like, I'm from Spain. And then we switched into Spanish, and, now we've exchanged details and have been conversing in Spanish. So things like that, just in everyday life situations, really, also play a huge role.
It's like the world's most epic strategy game, right? Where you have to try and get as much to overlap as possible to just, it's like you're tightening up that efficiency, as much as possible. And I think you're right in terms of, like with, if you were trying to get fit, you're a fat person and you're trying to lose weight who's only speaks English, for example. You need to keep looking at the path that you have to take, and every time you see the stairs, take the stairs, put those obstacles in your way so that you're constantly having to deal with, in that sense, in that metaphor, fitness and exercise, and that it's in your way and you have to do it, right? So it is like, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to send this email in Portuguese. I'm not going to reply in English, or even though they speak it.
And that's the concept of habit stacking,
Yeah.
I think obviously the hardest step is, or the hardest part of any new habit or process or skill is always the first one. It's always the beginning. So if you habit stack, and just as you said, if you know that every day you take this path and there's a set of stairs there, I can add on the stairs onto a pre-existing habit.
Exactly.
Same with language learning. Let's say you watch YouTube videos with yourself, or by yourself, or with your friends, or I don't know, whatever your life consists of. Maybe switching it up and watching one in another language. So yesterday, I was staying in a friend's house, and I put on. I'm watching Betty in Nueva York, so like Ugly Betty, but like a newer version in like it's a mix of Spanish and English. And I just put it on, and I said to my friend, I'm like, you want to learn Spanish here? Let's just watch this telenovela. You can pick up on it. So like involving those kind of like pop culture YouTube videos, Netflix series, things like that into your downtime as well works wonders.
Wow, that's it. Again, it's efficiency. If you're just like, I love watching TV shows. I'm learning French, but I like watching English TV shows. It's like, well, just find some French ones. Yeah.
And there are so many good ones. Do you know what? I have that friend. If you ask me, hey, have you seen this movie? 99% of the time, I haven't. And I think that it's down to the fact that I've either read a lot of books, or I've probably watched the same amount of movies, just in like 7 different languages. So I feel like, do yourself a favor, go explore, be curious, watch some foreign series, even if you have to put, most of the time I have to put subtitles even, but if you have to put subtitles, do it. But there are just so many great movies in multiple languages.
Even start with that, if you're just fascinated with a language, start watching foreign films. And that I was interviewing Lamont from Days of French and Swedish recently, and he had a really good video where he was asked the question, how do I build a good habit to learn languages? And I think the crux of it was sort out your life, like deal with your own habits in your life first. If you can get together a clean life with good habits where you're, constantly consistent with what you're doing, the language learning will take care of itself. Exactly. But if you have, a really disorganized life where you can't, brush your teeth every morning, clean your room, do whatever, there's no point in trying to be like, I'm going to practice French every single day for an hour. It's much more about, as you were talking about, habits, getting your habits sorted out.
And it comes back to self-awareness as well. you need to understand yourself as a person and how you function, where your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of accountability and organization, so that you can develop a system that works for you. So, I mean, I did a fantastic video interview with Lina Vasquez, you probably know.
Yeah, I've interviewed her. I love her. She's great.
Yeah. And we have a video on my channel. And honestly, I think it's one of the best polyglot interviews I've ever done, because we both are just so raw and honest in it.
Good.
And, we as well have very different personality types. And, a lot of people think that like polyglots or as I said, like any expert in any field is someone who is super organized. They have 3 calendars and whatnot. No, actually, it's just about finding a system that works for you. So I would say in my work life, I am very organized and I love to have a system, but naturally I'm a very spontaneous person. I'm like, let's go with the flow. I like to keep my options open. Let's do that. So I have what I always call a flexible structure. So I have certain days where I'm like, okay, this is my filming day. This is my coaching day. This is my French learning day. And that's a structure in itself, but I'm not outlining 11 a.m. I'm doing this, 2 p.m. I'm doing this, because I know that doesn't work for me. And at the end of the day, the goal is to take action and to have the outcome you want. So it actually doesn't matter when you do something. What matters is that you do it. And that's the whole thing around language learning as well. You need to stop being so picky on all the details and trying to find the best method and the best system. Pick 1 or 2 things, something passive, something active, combine them, practice them consistently, and you're going to see results. That's it.
Bingo. I think that's the hard part though, right? It's so easy to get lost in the sort of weeds of trying to collect all the best perfect resources, because one day I'll actually put in the time, and it's kind of like just get 1 or 2 resources and just get started, and you can deal with that later on.
And you'll figure out through trial and error, I actually don't like this resource very much. This one, however, loved using it. You want to find and use that thing that you're most passionate about, where it starts to not even feel like, you're putting in a great amount of effort.
Let's follow the fun, right? Get into that flow state where you just enjoy.
I love that. I'm going to steal that now.
I follow it straight to the fridge. So I had 2 more questions for you. I have one from Ada here, who it sounds like she's already on top of things, but she said, what advice do you have for someone wanting to learn their 5th language in their 40s? I'd love to learn a couple more languages, but I feel I'm too old.
Oh, Ada, no one is ever too old. Listen, my goal when I'm 60 is to be running marathons. So
I'll start at 59.
Yeah, well, no, but that's the thing. I also have students of mine that I've worked with, and they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, and they are actually, I would say, in comparison to some of the younger ones, the ones who are making the most progress.
Yeah.
Because they have, once again, they've learned how they learn, and just go for it. That's my advice. Don't let yourself be held back by your own limitations. And, I fundamentally believe whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right in both circumstances.
Exactly.
So, figure out, it's the same for anything. Why do you want to learn that language? What is that 5th language going to bring you? How are you going to enjoy it? How can you find ways to incorporate it into your life? And just go for it.
Do you think that it's good too to try and avoid comparing a language that you want to learn to languages you currently speak and needing that new one to get to the same level? And because I think that's something that monolinguals in particular think, oh my God, this hill is just too big to even start climbing. Because if I try and learn French, it's going to be so much effort to get it to where my English is. But in reality, you'd be like, well, what do you actually want to achieve? Do you just want to travel a bit around France and be able to, ask for directions and have small conversations? That's pretty achievable. Do you need it to be as equal to your English, or what? So.
Yeah, comparison is the killer of all enthusiasm. As soon as you compare, you are doing yourself a massive disservice. So anybody that you ask who's learned a language, doesn't matter how many, each person has such a unique journey as to how they learned the language, purely because of, life being unique. And what I'm going to experience tomorrow and based on my location and the people I know, is going to be very different to anybody else. So I would say you just be open-minded and curious. Look forwards, because with any language that I'm not going to say I've learned because I'm still learning them, but with any process that I've been through, none of them are the same. Portuguese as well, for example, if I had gone down the same route that I learned German with,
Wow.
my God, no.
your legal Portuguese would be on point.
Well, no, so yes and no, but I mean that it took me forever with German because I was young and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just following a system. Whereas now with Portuguese, I developed quite a high level in the span of a year and a half, because I picked up on all the mistakes that I had made previously. I figured out what was effective, what wasn't. I knew my why. I knew what to focus on and what I could leave behind and then pick up later in terms of, grammatical concepts or vocabulary, things like that. So I would say, seek out inspiration from other people, but enjoy the process and don't compare to anything that you've done previously, because it's not the same. It's like comparing apples and oranges. They're not the same. Yeah, they're fruit, but no,
Well, when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I used to train jiu-jitsu 6 times a week when I was doing my PhD, and it was always comparing myself to other people who were training. And it was the same even when I was going to the gym really hard, and I was always like, oh man, I want to be as big as him, as strong as him, as fast as him. And the biggest thing, I remember chatting to people about this and them being like, stop looking outside, look inside, compare yourself to yesterday and just say, am I better than I was yesterday or last week? Because they're real achievable goals that you can actually smash. Whereas, as you were saying, everyone else has their own journey and own experiences and own circumstances, so that it's not a fair comparison, right? But you yesterday or you last week definitely is, and you're probably going to smash it out of the park.
Exactly. And when you compare yourself to other people, you have a lot of variables in there that you don't see, because you're not in their body, you're not living their life. So you don't actually see all of the internal battles that they have with themselves. You don't see the adversity that they've been through.
The journey.
It was very much the same with, fitness and body image. Like when I was a teenager, I had eating disorders, and I was so obsessed with looking like 2 or 3 of these fitness models that I followed. And then the more I educated myself and the more I kind of, it was a whole process. But I realized, oh my gosh, my body is structured just genetically in a very different way. So I'm never going to have this figure. Do I want this figure? No. What does that figure actually mean to me? And I realized I want to be healthy. I want to be able to, kick ass at the gym and be able to lift 100 kilos. So I switched my focus, as you did, to the internal side of what, how am I going to make the next meal healthier? How am I going to make today's training amazing? And just repeating that and just focusing on the next step, because that's all you need to do. And so you remove that pressure from yourself, because it's unattainable. Anybody else's situation is unattainable, because even if you do exactly what they did, there are so many different factors.
Results may vary.
Exactly. We need a little one of those, in all the ads,
disclaimers.
Disclaimer text that scrolls through.
Yeah, where they have the guy at the end who's like, results may vary.
Exactly. Terms and conditions on the website.
So you mentioned about your journey with German and going to Germany and, putting yourself in all these obviously uncomfortable situations. I think you mentioned you were living with a German family. You got a job in Germany in order to make sure that you sort of had to do those things. Many of the listeners and viewers are people who are going to come to Australia from foreign countries. A lot of the ones that I meet find that sort of process very difficult. So they end up moving in with other Brazilians. They get jobs through other Brazilians that they know. They only speak Portuguese in their spare time. They still only watch Portuguese TV shows or whatever. What advice would you have for people in a sort of analogous situation to what you had in Germany? How to get the most out of it productively?
Well, let me think. It's so difficult to give a generalized answer. Because as we were just saying, everybody's situation is unique. I would say step outside of your comfort zone a little bit every single day. So if I look at my my Germany journey, I started actually living in for a week or two in a student place or whatever, and they were like English speakers, and I thought, no, this is not what I want. So I had some courses in the beginning in both English and German. Then I moved into the WG, which was the shared house, and all three of my housemates were just German and they spoke German. And that was kind of it was home, it was comfortable. They knew as well that, yeah, I'm not a native speaker, but my German was amazing. Like, to them at the time, I didn't think it was. But, I think that's the same thing with anybody moving to Australia. Like, come on. As we were saying, like, Australians are going to be amazed that you even speak another language, or you're putting in effort. If the tables were turned, they would understand the discomfort. And a lot of them do. I think we always think that we're going to be judged by people, or people are going to laugh at us. It has never happened. Yeah. I can tell you, I've never been laughed at by anybody else for making a mistake in a language in my life. And there have been many, many occurrences where I have made mistakes, all right, and said embarrassing things. So it's, just kind of stepping outside of your comfort zone on a daily basis would be the first thing. What can I do today to push myself a little bit? And I know that at the end of the day, I'm going to be in my bed. I love that expression. It was from the book The Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss.
Gotcha.
There was one of the interviews, and it said, it was a very similar question, like, how do you deal with the fear every day of stepping outside of your comfort zone? And the guy said, you know what? I just know at the end of the day, I'm going to be in my bed. So,
well, and if you were to ever, do you imagine that anyone that you've ever made a mistake with in any language remembers that?
No, and they're not perfect. Like, I think we tend to put other people sometimes on a pedestal, and we think, this is a native speaker, so they know everything. No. The language is just the little, facade on the outside. They could be a really great person, a really, negative person, whatever. The language aspect doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to say is really, just like find, for example, a hobby as well that you enjoy doing. So I love tennis, so I went and joined a tennis team at my German university, and they just own the fact that, own where you are from, own your story, own your background, and know that you are taking these risks because you want to better yourself. You're the person in the ring. So any spectator doesn't matter, because the person doing the work is the one to be commended. So you putting yourself, in these uncomfortable situations and taking risks and trying new things, that's an amazing thing. And like, own that aspect as well, that, it's not going to be easy, but there are people that aren't even willing to get on that plane. They're not willing to even look up, these opportunities and try out new things. So just see it as an experience, I think.
I think you're right, especially in terms of following the discomfort and challenging yourself. I felt like that when I got into, really hard into jiu-jitsu and into the gym. You almost, once you start actually looking for pain, positive pain, not necessarily, broken bones, but you look for the struggle, you actually begin to enjoy it, and it kind of starts picking up and becoming a bit of a positive feedback loop. So I think, if you encourage yourself to do those things, it's going to speed up.
Yeah. And that discomfort is very temporary. I mean, think about when we first learned to walk as kids, like, that was hard. We fell down all the time. When you see little kids, they keep falling. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. And now it's like, what? That was difficult for me at some point. And it's the same with anything. It's the same with languages. It's the same with, any type of sport and any skill that you're learning. What is difficult for you right now is temporary. You're going to pass that, and in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, in a year, you're going to look back and be like, wow, look at me back. Look at me now.
That thing's about to be in my rear vision mirror.
Yes, exactly. Careful, objects maybe. But exactly, and I think it's also important to take time to reflect. So I journal on a daily basis, and I have been for 3 years, and it's like my accountability to myself, because oftentimes, we actually make progress in something, but we don't take the time to look back at and really take in and reflect on all of the little things that we have done to get us to where we are now.
To pause you there, I recently, or today, downloaded the videos of when I first started speaking Portuguese, because when I first started, I did a weekly video and I was only using Duolingo and a few friends, and I didn't remember how bad I was and how much I struggled in the beginning, because I had just blinkers on. I'm just going forward, but I wasn't looking back to check. So something like a journal or even videos you keep for yourself or that sort of thing must be really good as a reality check of the fact that you are making progress.
Yeah, exactly. And even just you can do it in so many ways. Like taking videos you don't need to post them anywhere. But looking at all the little situations or maybe social situations and things you've maybe written or in your files on your computer, just taking some time to look back or stumble across things. You're like, yeah, I have made progress, and that's all that matters. It is you versus you.
Awesome. I think that's a good place to end. Lina, I've kept you for like an hour and a half, so I really appreciate your time. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Sorry, what did you say?
Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Well, you can find me on YouTube. Just put in Lina Vasquez and I'll come up. On Facebook, same thing, Lina Vasquez. On Instagram, LinkedIn. Yeah, that's where I am. So I look forward to seeing you guys and talking to you again as well. Hopefully, Pete. I'll have to get you on my channel, actually. I think that'd be awesome.
Com certeza, cara. Com certeza.
Legal. Obrigada.
Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.